There it is right there.
Hello.
Robert McGinnis.
I'm here.
Hey, Daniel Ott here from the Edge Television Broadcast.
Well, thank you, Daniel. It's good to be with you this evening.
Well, I'll tell you what, I just got done reading your book. I've been going over it. Man, there's so much stuff in that book. I think because of what's going on in our society right now, you would think everybody would want to get a copy of this. I'm holding it in my hands right now. The Deeper State, the Imminent Final Empire. Robert McGinnis, before we begin, just tell us what provoked you or gave you the impetus to write this book.
Well, it's a fair question. I've been here in Washington off and on for certainly most of my adult life. My mother was on Capitol Hill and worked in a White House staff, and I came and went through the Pentagon, and I'm there now. I've seen so much of what I write about that, it just seemed to be a natural issue, because with the 2016 election, Daniel, I saw all of this going on, the fake news, the stuff in the background, the manipulation, the sabotage, and so forth. And I said, people need to understand how things really work, not how they think and want it to work in Washington.
Well, yeah, Washington, for years, I think as people sit around their kitchen tables, they would say, Washington doesn't know what they're doing. But in the end, we had this sort of innate belief that they must know. We're just, we're farmers out here. We're, for me, I'm just a cowboy. Plumbers and electricians. We assume that this Washington industry over there has our best interest in mind, and they make laws and things. Say, well, we may not understand it, but they must have researched it, so therefore they're right. So we had this innate belief that they were good and had the honest intentions. But is that what we're finding to be true?
Well, they're doing what they're doing in their own best interest, certainly to be reelected as the political class. And of course, the lobbyists are there to do what is in their client's best interest, whether it be another government outside of this country, or it be, an organization that works for a radical like George Soros.
Mm-hmm.
So these things are going on. I would argue that much of the bureaucracy, these are well-intended people, very well paid, thank you, and as a direct result, they tend to become complacent about their impact on average citizens in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so you get a bureaucracy that is laissez-faire, not terribly energized. They love to take their salaries and their perks, but sometimes they aren't always doing the best for the American people. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the political people, they're cycled in and out of here at such a pace, every 2 years for Congress, 6 years for the Senate, and of course the president and his team come and go every 4 years. It takes a long time to learn how the federal government functions or doesn't function, and as these political people come and go, they bring in, sometimes enthusiastic, great ideas, and then they run into roadblocks because the bureaucrats won't let them accomplish that. Now, that's where we talk about the swamp and draining the swamp that President Trump has promised to do. Like his predecessors, who in many cases promised to drain the swamp, they got here and they found out, that swamp is full of critters that aren't very friendly, and it's very deep, and so it's very difficult to change it. Now, to President Trump's credit, he's been doing away with a lot of regulation. He's been doing a lot of things that are making progress toward draining the swamp, but goodness, it is a real challenge.
Well, yeah, and I think what he said was he wanted to get rid of 2 regulations for every one, but I think he ended up saying they're getting rid of 22 regulations for every single one.
Well, there's certainly a lot of regulations. Governments are great about that, aren't they? They love to write regulations. Elitists often get into government and they think they know better than the average person, and so they're going to tell you how to dot the I's and cross the T's, and they're going to do it from 1,000 miles away. And by the way, they're going to enforce it, and if you don't like it, they're going to reach into your back pocket and take out some money. So, dealing with reality here, and unfortunately, Sometimes we get people that have been in position much, much too long. They need to go back and get a real job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the title you have here, it says the imminent final empire. Would you suggest that we're in the throes of a fourth empire now with one more to come?
Well, what I really mean there is that this could very well be a catalyst. This whole globalization, deep state, progressive way in which people are thinking in the positions of authority around the world, that this is pushing us in a direction where we've really never been before. Yes, we've had progressives. We've had people that really think they know better than the rest of us. We've had a little bits and pieces of globalism, but now we have instant communication. We have corporations that are giant, reach into every country. We have instantaneous communication. We have people seeking global government. We have collectivism. It's really a radical ideology that is beginning to get some traction. And that traction we saw certainly in the 2016 campaign. And of course, that divides the country today. You have people in the progressive camp that just don't understand people that are more populist or more nationalist and that want to protect the sovereignty of this country, to close down the borders to illegal immigrants, that want to protect our jobs, that want to protect us from the wiles of radical Islam or the wiles of a country like the re-emergent Russia or the communist Chinese that really have not our best interest in mind, but would like to control us. So, I deal with all of those issues. It seems rather complex, but really it comes down to, as far as I'm concerned, good and evil.
Well, they have been taking advantage of the United States. It seems like the whole global system has been. It's been like almost like a frenzy, a feeding frenzy on U.S. Laws, on our wealth, and it seems like our own people have been helping the rest of the world take advantage of us. And that's what's so weird is like Trump actually said, like to Pakistan, said, "Hey, we're not going to give you any more cash." And then it's like a shock to the system. And people in this country are screaming, wait a minute, we're not giving millions, hundreds of millions to Pakistan? Why not? Because we were trained that I guess we're supposed to give away our wealth. And that's the insanity of the elite and the globalist agenda.
Well, it really is. That was refreshing, I thought, when the president made it very clear. Pakistan, we've been fighting a war since 2001 in next door Afghanistan. Oh, by the way, you've been harboring all these, some of these Taliban, these Al-Qaeda people that hate us, that people that are using your territory to, attack us. Well, we've given you all these billions of dollars. The gravy train stops here. We're not going to give you any more until we start seeing some sort of support in what we are interested in doing. I remember following the vote in the UN on whether or not the president's decision to make Jerusalem the place where we're going to send our embassy, to recognize it as the capital of Israel. Well, the following day, I was in the Pentagon, and I'm there every work day, and I got an email, and the administration was saying, well, how much by country do we spend? Now, so I suspect that email went out all over the federal government to collect how much by the 180 or so countries in the world are we spending? Because, as you will recall, Daniel, that something like 122 or so countries voted against us to condemn us for recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Well, sometimes payback is pretty tough, but if you're going to, stiff arm us, why can't we stiff arm back and withhold some of the money that we've been giving you over the years?
Well, yeah, and I'm with you on that because I think if we went back and looked, Pakistan probably voted against us in the UN. And let me ask you something. I think a lot of people are very proud of Nikki Haley. Do you see her as presidential timber?
Oh, yeah. Well, having been governor, that kind of puts her up in that upper echelon. And, she's really shown a lot of moxie in standing up to these tinfoil dictators up at the UN. Now, I've been to UN. I've spoken there. I understand how it operates. It sucks up a lot of money and a lot of airtime, but accomplishes virtually nothing good. And so, as far as I'm concerned, they can give back the land to the David Rockefeller and his crowd, and they can go somewhere in the third world and try to, talk to one another. But don't waste our time and money.
Is there, in research of this book, The Deeper State, did you come across any information that indicates there is any sort of depopulation effort underway?
Well, what do you mean by depopulation effort?
Reduction of the population, say through war or through disease or anything like that. In the sort of the Georgia guidelines or guidestones type of way.
Yeah, eugenics and the like. Certainly, every one of the progressives that I research in there, George Soros, David Rockefeller, Hillary Clinton, even Henry Kissinger, I profile them and others. But the Rockefellers, of course, you no doubt know the name Margaret Sanger. Well, they were some of the original funders of Margaret Sanger. And, of course, they funded abortifacients. The Rockefellers are deep into this progressive, eugenics world. So is George Soros. He can't, he loves abortion. He loves the homosexual movement. He loves the Antifa movement. He loves Black Lives Matter. He's funding a lot of these things, not only in this country, but abroad. So these progressives like Soros, like Rockefeller and others are hell-bent on doing their best to destroy this country and what it's represented. And, of course, they have a rich lineage that traces its way back to Western Europe, that came over here and contaminated Woodrow Wilson, perhaps the worst president of the United States ever, and then, of course, influenced the likes of Franklin Roosevelt, who, of course, gave us the New Deal, which was a bad deal for the American people ultimately. And then, of course, they influenced all the way up through Jimmy Carter and other luminaries like Barack Obama. So we're dealing with progressives through the ages, and all they know how to do is to take from the American people and give it out to people that haven't been able to contribute to society in a meaningful way by choice.
A lot of people say that there is just groups of families that control everything. Do you agree with that?
Well, there are wealthy. Yeah, there are clearly wealthy people. The Bill Gateses of the world, and there are in one of the appendices in the book, I go through a host of these people, and not surprisingly, Daniel, the vast majority of the people that kind of fit in that billionaire category, they tend to be very progressive. In other words, they're funding a lot of this leftist stuff, whether it's abortion or gay rights or, anti-government sort of things. But at the same time, you wouldn't dare, impugn their integrity or try to tell them they have to give up something because they think they're elite, they think they're special, and you have no right to tell them what to do. So there are a handful of folks in the world, and I identify a list in there that's been around for a long time, and I elaborate on some of those persons. So yeah, there is a cabal. And there are these secret societies. I talk about the Bilderberger Group. I talk about the CFR. I talked about the Trilateral Commission and others in great detail because they coalesce around people that are self-appointed, some of which are selected for very specific positions, and then they flood the government with these people who then get in there and they manipulate the bureaucracy and the direction of the policy of the country for their own nefarious purposes.
Let me ask you something, Robert. before the election, the media was on Hillary's side, of course, the intelligentsia, of course, all the Democrats and most of the Republicans, it seems like now, even George Bush admitted he voted for Hillary. But there was an anticipation and expectation that she was going to win in a landslide. I saw reports before the election, she had a 90-something% chance of winning. When Trump won, was it just a normal groundswell of people, or do you think there was any supernatural assistance in that?
Well, I can't say with certitude. When I look at the deeper state, I see three layers. I see the political authority, the politicians and the bureaucrats that have legitimate authority. I see political influence, and those are the outside lobbyists. But the third layer, I see as a spiritual level, a layer. There's a lot in Washington that I consider demonic, certainly occultic. And there clearly is that influence in Washington on the elected officials, some of which have caved, others which are strong Christians and have resisted that. Mm-hmm. So yes, I do believe that especially the influencers in Washington, too often than not, are involved in either a demonic and occultic, maybe a Luciferian type of life or connections, and some of this is documented. I've said a bit myself. I've been very outspoken about Washington being the most evil place in the world, and that's because there's great power here, and where there is great power, there is going to be great evil, and those two coalesce too often, and as a result, a lot of people suffer.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the deeper state is responsible for the Trump dossier?
Well, of course. The Trump dossier is full of lies and fabrications intended to undermine the will of the people to, elect someone who would represent them to the swamp and destroy the swamp and return government as it was well intended to the people. Unfortunately, you had, the likes of Miss Clinton and her, cadre of pretty evil people, as far as I'm concerned. I call Miss Clinton herself a Luciferian psychopath, which I get pummeled occasionally for, but her associations and the definition of a psychopath fit her like a T. But yeah, all you have to do is listen to the likes of Donna Brazile, who, of course, was former head of the DNC, and the things that she wrote in her book, which hacks the inside story. And, what Donna basically said is the fix was in well in advance. And, Hillary had every intention of winning, threw a lot of money basically to buy off the DNC, and then it's spent, close to $1 billion buying off the media and anyone else that would listen. So the media, good, bad, or indifferent, were critical of Mr. Trump, and of course were surprised as anyone, as we saw on the late night of the election when the likes of CNN, MSNBC, and everybody else except for Fox News just were alarmed. They had no idea what was happening before them, but it was truly a revolution, a grassroots revolution, in which the very populist Donald Trump really got to the people of America and got over the finish line.
Do you think he has a chance to win re-election?
Well, if I were a betting man, I'd say very much. He's just getting the tax bill through, given the slim margin that he had in the Senate, and the rank opposition from the left, and of course he's going to fill this not only vacancies in the Supreme Court but in the appellate courts. He's going to really fix for the next generation or so the court system, so it returns to what it was originally intended to do, and that is to interpret the Constitution, not to write, out of nowhere laws that were never intended by the founders of this country.
There is an effort underway to get everyone around Trump. Is that because they really can't get Trump and they just want some trophies along the way? Or do you think that they're working around methodically in a circle to get him?
Well, you're talking about Manifold, you're talking about Flynn, there are others that have worked there. Yeah, of course, if you make yourself vulnerable, and I will tell you, being in government, people often say things they shouldn't. They make decisions about abuse of aircraft or spending money in ways that is not representative of the best interest of the people. And so, they're humans. They make mistakes, and some of them are nefarious, and they shouldn't make that, and they should get caught. But I don't really think that the people, for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the people that Mr. Trump has put into positions of authority, that he's going to have a lot of trouble. I think he's got good people. Now, that you're going to wear a lot of people out, because the pace in which, and I see it every day, the pace these people go would kill a young man, much less some of them that are, in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, I think for the most part, they would love to destroy Mr. Trump, but I think they will go after him. They will continue to go after those he's appointed. But like I say, he's got a great team, and I think they'll continue to serve America well.
I have, as I was reading the book, I was taking some notes, and you make a lot of comments about globalism and its impact on the environment and rate of consumption and international investment and these kinds of things. When you put it all together, is that just really a hodgepodge of various little skirmishes in a major war, or is each one of those a piece that is directing to a larger effort that's going to happen one way, almost like a singularity type of an event?
Well, it is sort of like a singularity event. The globalists are, as I said earlier, sort of a radical ideology. They believe certain things. They believe in a new world order. In other words, the merger of capitalism and communism to bring about global government. They believe in population reduction. We talked about eugenics moments ago, but you've got the likes of Ted Turner, who said the world really only needs 350 million people, not the 8 billion that we have. Now, he doesn't outright say we need to go out and kill 6+ billion people, but he makes it pretty clear what his druthers are. These people would have us return to what I call feudalism. In other words, they're going to dictate to you and me what we can consume. How much electricity, how much food we can eat, where we can live, how we can live. They like planned society. In other words, they really believe in scientific dictatorship. The elite run everything. They brainwash the masses. They genetically engineer the people to be obedient. This is Brave New World 2017 and 18. That's what they really want. And they make no pretense about it in their writings. And that's why when I go through and explain who Soros and Rockefeller and Clinton really are, I delve into these areas to expose them so that people understand who wants to run this world.
Trump seems to be making decisions on his own. At least that's what's presented to us. How do you see it, Robert?
No, the president's a smart guy. In a tweet earlier today, he says he's a genius. That's probably true. But even geniuses need people to give them facts and analysis. He hears from the CIA director, Pompeo, every day. So he stays on top of what's going on there. He hears from his secretaries, either individually who visit the White House, and I know some of the folks that go over there. So the president is listening to all sorts of folks. He gets a bad rap from those that don't like his ideology, don't like his agenda, don't like his business approach. So that's tough. That's just the way things are. As Barack Obama said on the first day of his after his inauguration, there are consequences when you win elections. Well, the other shoe's on. Face the facts.
Well, I noticed too that Obama's popping out of his little gopher hole here and there and trying to take credit for the rebounding economy. And I was thinking, well, let me see. If I go back in his 8 years, one of his accomplishments was getting grown men in a little girl's bathroom. So I guess somehow you can work an economic miracle from that. I don't know. Am I missing something?
Yeah, well, Barack Obama is a progressive of the same ilk as Hillary Clinton or David Rockefeller or George Soros and the like. His economic plans, if had given another 4 years under Clinton, would have been the death knell to this country. He had no concept as to how to run an economy, much less a small business. And so it's good that a guy that was really an adjunct professor, someone that was an organizer of a small group of people there in Chicago, all of a sudden blossomed into someone who was a world leader. And this was not by mistake; it was by design. The people that run a lot of these secret organizations like the Bilderbergers, they're called the high priest of globalization. What they do on an annual basis is they look around the world and they say, well, who should we recruit and what do we want them to do? Back in 1992 or 91 at Baden-Baden, Germany, they had recruited Bill Clinton, a little-known Arkansas governor, and they took him over to Baden-Baden and they filled his brain with all sorts of things called NAFTA. And he said, if you will support this, we will give you the money and the press support to become president of the United States. Now, that was a big deal for Bill Clinton, who had stars in his eyes anyway. And so he goes off and he starts talking NAFTA, and all of a sudden the money flows and the endorsements come in, and they made him the president. Now, the same thing happened with Barack Obama. So these truly are kingmakers, and it happens with other people in the world as well. And I document this in the Deeper State. So you have a cabal of these rich, powerful people who really think they're the elite of the world, who think that they know best for all of us, and they're going to put their own guys and gals in positions of great authority, dictate the policy, and therefore, we become the serfs of the world, serving these masters that they've put in place.
Well, let me ask you, Robert McGinnis, the investigation on Trump, do you sense that it's actually sort of twisting back against the deep state itself?
Well, obviously we haven't heard from Robert Mueller. It's only secondhand. We have seen, the few indictments, and those I don't see how they really touch the Trump administration with anything of significance. There's so much out there, clutter, that it's hard to discern what the truth is. It seems to me that, the left, under the likes of Hillary Clinton, were dealing, off the bottom of the deck on so many issues. Giving away our highly classified material as she did from, her little computer server there in her home in New York, or doing pay for play, which obviously is now getting more attention because she really enriched her foundation, her husband's foundation, by giving access to people that would, reach into the pockets.
Pay for play. Well, that's part of what I'm saying. As isn't that investigation turning back on her? I mean, now did they just say that the FBI is doing an investigation on the Clinton Foundation again?
Well, they say they're looking at it. Now, they don't always tell us exactly what they're doing, and that's probably good. But I would hope that the likes of the intelligence committees in the Senate and the House, as well as the Justice Department, really get into the nitty gritty here of what the left was doing and trying to undermine the certainly the Trump campaign and trying to fix it for Hillary. We knew about before the election a year plus ago that there was an FBI investigation conducted in 4 places: the L.A., San Francisco, Detroit, and New York, and it compiled basically a deep state report for Director then of the FBI, Jim Comey. Now, what they found was that there was actionable intelligence within the federal government of a growing and an organized movement to block and interfere with the new administration, with the Trump administration. And they, in fact, reported on meetings that were hosted by outside dissidents that brought in government workers that were willing to cooperate and then to actively sabotage government programs that they disagreed with. Now, this was given to Jim Comey. This is reported, interestingly, by Ed Klein of the New York Times Magazine in his new book. And so you've got all that stuff, and I already mentioned the Donna Brazil stuff, and of course we heard the testimony not long ago in the House of Andrew McCabe, who all of a sudden decided it was time that he needed to resign or at least retire because of all the stuff that he's been involved in. So we know we have some problems at our Justice Department. Hopefully, AG Sessions is going to get it fixed, or the president perhaps will have to find somebody to replace him.
Well, what he's doing is he's pulling the Lois Lerner. How she weaponized the IRS and then she retired with a golden parachute. That's what he's doing.
Well, I agree, and that's something that the taxpayer ought to have the final say there. These people ought to be held in contempt of court or in contempt of Congress because they've been told to do certain things, and I don't see evidence that they've been doing what they've been told to do. They're there to serve the people, not to serve their own interests, but the people of the United States. And whether it's Lerner or it's some of the hijinks that the former Attorney General was doing with the ATF and Fast and Furious, or even some of the misconduct at the Veterans Administration. The past administration under Barack Obama was so utterly corrupt, and they so evidence the deep state progressive stuff that I talk about in the deeper state that it certainly makes or should make the average person ill.
Now, what did you call that? The deeper state? I mean, we all hear the deep state. So what are you saying? It goes way deeper than we all expect?
Yeah, well, when I go through those 3 layers, most people only talk about the political class and the bureaucracy, the people that have legitimate authority, and then they talk about those that influence that legitimate authority, the lobbyists and the NGOs and the wealthy people and the newspaper and the media. But then I talk about, of course, the demonic influence, the occultic influence, the stuff that you can't necessarily see, but it's there because the evidence is overwhelming of something that is just not quite right, that is influencing what's going on in Washington.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was a joke when Hillary says she'd like to have a voodoo doll of Trump. I would think that she is probably practicing voodoo, and she's probably wondering why her satanic masters let her lose.
Well, I call her a Luciferian, and it's not because she necessarily worships Lucifer, but she sees herself as a demigod, someone maybe that practices, magic. It's interesting that when you look at her background, there was a book by Larry Nichols. He's the author of Clinton Chronicles, and he interviewed Bill Clinton, and Bill said that Hillary and this is a quote, she and a group of women, and she would be part of a witches'
Whoa.
church out in L.A. And then, of course, then you have, interestingly, Gary Aldridge, of course, the former FBI agent who worked in the Clinton White House. He talked about the Clinton administration and the Clinton family as, quote, corrupt disaster beyond redemption or repair. And that he said when he looked at, of all things, when Hillary Clinton decorated the Christmas tree in the White House, mm-hmm. she put on there what he classified as pornographic and standard occultic symbols, black magic symbols, wow. and like. And then, of course, Hillary Clinton had associations, and this is according to author Bob Woodward, who you may recall has written a number of books, mm-hmm. but one of which he talks about Hillary Clinton channeling Eleanor Roosevelt, and then, of course, having an association with Jean Houston, who was, sort of this person who deals in the channeling. I'll tell you that my own mother was the personal assistant to Jean Dixon, who was someone that wow. used to do this sort of thing with White House first ladies. And so I know personally about some of this type of behavior, which, as far as I'm concerned, it's demonic. And then it would appear as if Hillary Clinton had a lot of people around her that were in that ilk.
Mm. Well, I would say that they don't participate in that because it's fun and games. I think they actually have seen a rise to power and in some sort of empowerment. But whatever that is, there must be something on the other side, say, and for lack of terms to use, the Trump side, his forces must have, in the spiritual or supernatural realm, had to be more powerful than all the spirit cooking and witch cauldrons and hexes and seances that they did over there on the left.
Well, no doubt. Even Jesus Christ made it very clear when confronting the demon-possessed man there on the northern shores of the Sea of Galilee, and he was identified by the legion within the man, and the demons asked to be cast into the swine that were in a herd nearby, and they ran off the cliff. Yes, the demonic knows, the Spirit of Christ. Having been in circumstances myself where I've come across people that certainly in the Wicca community, which I've personally met, or in other, what I would consider, very evil groups, they understand, the love of Christ, the Spirit of Christ in people. And so the adversary, in the circumstance where we have good and evil at work in Washington, it's very, very clear. I've been doing this for decades and decades in this environment, and I've come to recognize that this is very much a spiritual war.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick question came in from our chat that's watching the show. It said, what branch of military did you serve in?
I went to West Point in 1969, graduated in 73, served as an infantry officer for 20 years, retired in 1993, joined the Family Research Council for 9 years, serving as the vice president for policy, returned to the Pentagon, where I run a staff of international experts, and have been doing that for over 15 years. So I was an infantry officer.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. You obviously have a very nice resume there, and we appreciate your service. And I would say that you're probably not given to the fairy tales and stories, but when you talk about the possibility that there's demonic activity, how do you square that with, say, the fact-based sort of military lifestyle and thought processes? How do you merge those two together?
Well, anyone that knows Jesus Christ as his personal Savior understands there is a spiritual dimension to life, and those that are of that ilk when they come across a contrary spirit, there is a real sense. I've been involved in that sort of lifestyle for the last 60 years, and so I have some experience, not just in this country, but I've traveled the world, working with Christians in many, many environments, some of which are war environments, and I've just seen firsthand plenty of evidence, and then of course I've seen it as I've indicated in this city. So, facts are facts, but there's a lot about this world that we can't quite explain, and that's where I, have to attribute it to the spiritual world. And I can only have five senses. I'm totally convinced there's much more out there that I can't perceive given my limitations.
Okay, awesome. All right, and somebody wrote in, Kevin wrote in a question to you. He says, do you believe that Hillary or any of the deep state traitors will do jail time?
Well, I think they should. I have a high security clearance, and people I work around do as well. We know that jeopardizing the secrets of this country, should come with a high price. And if any of us were, found guilty of leaking or giving away classified material, as was she, obviously, based upon the emails that have been leaked, they should be spending hard time. I hope that we'll get justice, but right now justice has not been meted out to those with her and to her herself.
Do you trust Jeff Sessions?
Well, Jeff Sessions is a good man, served faithfully as a judge, and has been a great senator. I just hope that by recusing himself to the investigation on Trump, that has not bound him from prosecuting or seeking justice for the likes of Hillary Clinton or all the cadre of people that surround her. So I think he understands what should be done. There may be things that, and I suspect there are, that I don't understand, but I hope that he's going to move forward and moves forward expeditiously so justice can find its day.
Do you think there would be a riot if they ever arrested Hillary Clinton?
Well, in this country, you've got Antifa, Black Lives Matter. I mean, these people riot when there's a difference of opinion about a football game. So, there probably will be, but, the left understands how they've been nefarious in their, in their behavior. They don't like to be found, found guilty, but they know that they are. And so, if we're going to be a country of laws, and I hope that we continue to be, then people that breach those laws need to pay a penalty. And it would appear to me that we have plenty of evidence to suggest that that is what has happened.
There are people making claims that the Russians interfered with our election. That whole thing is a hoax, isn't it?
Well, no, not necessarily. Keep in mind, intelligence services all over the world have a mission, and the mission is to represent the best interests of their countries. Vladimir Putin is an old KGB hand who understands how to manipulate his adversaries. He did it in the Republic of Georgia and eastern Ukraine. He has done it in Western Europe. And he has harnessed the cyber warriors of the Russian Federation to do their best to plant fake news and to manipulate the chasm between the left and the right in this country. I have every reason to believe that that's exactly what has happened. Now, did they influence Trump? I don't see any evidence of that. In fact, I believe that they were going after Hillary much more than Trump. But clearly they tried to divide this country, and they're going to continue to do that. You have to understand how, I'm a cold warrior to a certain degree. I spent a lot of years on the front in Europe at Fulda Gap. I saw a lot of bad things from the Russians. I saw their propaganda. I even visited the Soviet Union when it was still, a communist regime. I understand how they manipulate populations and people and how nefarious they are. What we are seeing over the last couple of years is nothing new. It's out of the old KGB playbook, and they'll continue to do it as long as they can. And in fact, I'm arguing that, we're starting a new Cold War, not only with Russia, but also with China. So tough times are ahead.
Trump recently just announced he was going to open up all of the, or most of the resources around the United States for oil drilling. But there's been pushback from the states, some of the states themselves. What do you think about that?
Well, probably Jerry Brown and the pot-smoking people in California don't want their scenery off the West Coast hurt with oil derricks. Mm-hmm. I can understand, their thinking. But no, for the most part, I spent 4 years in Alaska in Fairbanks. Anwar, nobody lives up there except a handful of caribou. There's a lot of oil. We can use that oil. I don't see why in the world we wouldn't want to use it, tap it. We should be able to tap the oil in the Atlantic Shelf, the Gulf Shelf. America is producing is the third leading producer of oil in the world today, thanks to fracking, and that's good news as far as I'm concerned. We're no longer at the mercy of the likes of the mullahs of Iran or the sheikhs of Saudi Arabia. Though we have concerns over there, they aren't going to dictate our future, and that's a wise decision on the part of our administration.
I always wondered why it is, with all the resources the United States has, if it was really a concern with the environment, why wouldn't we be concerned with the Middle East environment if we're getting our oil from them? I guess we're not concerned with that environment over there. But do you think there was a deeper plan here, Robert, that to keep the United States from accessing our own resources so that we would pump hundreds of billions of dollars into the Middle East buying their oil? And wouldn't that mean that the Middle East has a reason to interfere with our elections to keep people in power that will continue to not allow us to develop our own resources?
Well, other than the Saudis, I don't know who really has the resources to interfere over here. The Saudis, of course, pump a lot of money all over the world, mostly to proselytize people into their Salafist radicalism.
I'm talking about in the form of campaign contributions, such as the Clinton Foundation.
Well, they do. They pump a lot of hundreds of millions of dollars on a fairly frequent basis into the coffers of sympathetic political people. The Saudis lead the way in lobbying in Washington. If they can pour the spigots on and get things done on Capitol Hill because they have deep pockets. So that's the nature of the Saudis. Now, was there a conspiracy by the left to have us depend upon Middle East oil to keep us from draining our oil reservoirs? Well, I think the progressives really believe that they can use things like green energy, solar, wind, and the like to get things accomplished. It's interesting that over the last few days up in Massachusetts, which is great into green energy, those windmills and those solar panels aren't working all that well in this cold, cloudy weather. So they're concerned about getting cold, and they've shut down a bunch of coal plants and the like. We have to be realists in a world where reality serves our best interest, and unfortunately the likes of some of these leftists is that they just don't care about what is common sense to most of us.
What would you describe to be the swamp, the description of the swamp? What is the swamp that needs to be drained?
Well, the swamp is where we have, the likes of Lois Lerner, who thinks that they know the direction of the country. They're serving their own political best interest or that of the administration that appointed them. They could care less about the American people. They're going to pad their own incomes in a way that serves their ideology. Keep in mind, a lot of the federal government, and it's not by mistake that the area, the metro area here in the Washington, D.C. area, votes very, very blue. Maryland, District of Columbia, and Northern Virginia. It's incredibly blue. Why is it incredibly blue? Because the Democrats have been recruiting the civil servants to their leftist viewpoints. And we see it all the time. If you want to get somebody far left elected, they come to this area and they're put in position. So when you're in federal government, you hear these leftist ideas. They just, echo through the buildings. They applaud, the likes of Barack Obama, and they're incredibly fearful of the likes of a Donald Trump, who has, populist conservative views, who doesn't believe that the bureaucracy is always right, that the political class, should not, be in power their entire life. They actually they ought to have a real job before they come here. And then, of course, the lobbyists. The lobbyists are part of the swamp. They're the people that are telling, basically, with a fistful of money in one hand and a pat on the back on the other, saying, this is what we want you to do. And the politicians do that, which is not necessarily what the American people want nor deserve. So that's all part of this swamp that I talk about in here. And, of course, the globalists, who I go into a great deal of detail, are progressives that are doing exactly all of this together.
Lately, I see on most of the news feeds, it's like everybody has the same story. They're trying to come up with the idea that Trump is insane and that we need to enact the 25th Amendment. What do you think about what's going on with all that?
Well, if insanity means the stock market's going to go to 27,000, I think it's great.
A little insanity is doing us all good. Now that reminds me, and that's another question I have for you, Robert. Doesn't the left see their same investments in 401ks accelerating vertically? I mean, wouldn't, and they certainly can't say Obama's doing that. Do you think that even though those numbers are going up in those accounts, that they still hate Trump with a passion and would rather that they have less money and no Trump?
Well, it's a fair question. I'll have to ask some of the lefties that I know to see if they've even bothered to look at their 401ks, if in fact they're doing that. Of course, they tend to put their hope in big government, which of course is all about the globalists and the progressives' way of looking at life. They don't believe that it's necessarily in our best interest to save for the future, like most conservatives believe in. No, they're about living it to the hilt and expecting government to fill in the void when they get older.
To take a quote from Mitt Romney, man, there's at least 42% of the population that could care less whether or not the stock market rebounds or the economy goes vertical.
Well, that's true. There are a lot of people out there that don't have 401ks that are living day to day, and
they tend to vote Democrat too, though.
Well, they do. Big government buys votes. Because it provides housing, it provides food, it provides cell phones, it provides whatever you need, and that's certainly not the intent of the original founders of this country, and it is reflective of what progressives think. Progressives see themselves as the genius elites that need to be what I call feudalistic. In other words, they need to dictate to you what you can eat, where you can go to school, what you're going to do for work, every aspect. They're the people that are trying to run our public schools. And not only do they want us to feed our kids, they want to clothe our kids, they want to tell the parents how to parent. I mean, they're big nanny state people, and that's what progressives are giving us in a big government. The government was never too big for a progressive, and unfortunately, that's what Washington is all about at this point.
Can progressives point to any success?
Well, they like to point to the United Nations, but as far as I'm concerned, that's a dismal failure. Of course, Woodrow Wilson tried to create the League of Nations, and fortunately we had some Republicans that said that's a stupid idea, and they didn't pass it. Progressives are all about food stamps and Social Security, the New Deal. You name a progressive, they have these big ideas of how they're going to solve the world's problems by picking our back pockets. Unfortunately, time and again, it proves to be misdirected.
Well, I'll tell you what, Robert, here in the Midwest, it's so cold, the Democrats have their hands in their own pockets.
Well, that's good to hear. I hope they keep them there.
So, that tells you exactly how cold it is. Well, listen, right at the top there, right at the end of the interview, how can people get this book, The Deeper State, Imminent Final Empire?
Well, it's available on Amazon or in Barnes & Noble and other bookstores. It's Defender Publishing Group, and they're available online as well. But Amazon's a pretty good resource, and all you have to do is put The Deeper State, and it'll pop up there, and you can order it.
Mm-hmm. And in your bio section on our website, I have a direct link in your bio section to that at Amazon, too, as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, can we have you back on the Edge television broadcast again sometime?
Oh, sure. Let me know when you want to talk.
Okay, I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Well, you take care now.
All right, bye-bye. All right, everybody, that was retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis talking about The Deeper State. Next week, we're going to have with us Derek Gilbert, and he's going to be talking about The Day the Earth Stands Still. Actually, no, he's in 2 weeks. We're going to have, here, let me check my records. Hang on. Check my, who do I have coming on? All right, somebody's coming on next week. That's great. And what we're going to do in the next hour, at the top of that, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back with a new part of the program we're going to call the Bear Report. It's going to be a recap of the week's headlines. We're going to ring Bear up and have his take on the headlines for this week. And also, I will do the ranting points, and we'll take your calls for any of those that want to talk about what you feel the 2018 year will bring, predictions for 2018, and we'll have the 800 number for you to call in for that. This show will begin to replay in our main player directly after the show. We'll put it up in our YouTube channel, extract the audio, and put it into our TuneIn Radio playlist, which is simulcasting this program right now. We'll podcast it as well. And so there you go, many ways to view or listen to the program. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Facebook. What else am I on? I'm on all, man. Twitter. Oh man, I'm a Trump helped me Twitter-tize the world, man. I do a lot of tweets. Yeah, hey, I like it because I get to count the looks, man. So it's kind of fun. Anyway, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back.